Thank you everybody for joining us here tonight. This is our first virtual training session of 2021, and we're glad that you could join us here tonight. Just a couple things before we get started. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jillian Hawkins. I'm the Assistant Executive Director with the IDCCA. And if you haven't attended one of our virtual training sessions before, just a couple of ground rules. First, tonight's training is going to last about an hour, including question and answer at the end. So if you need to get a drink or anything, try to get that now because we try to get through everything in an hour. We are recording this training, so if there's anything that you miss or want to go back to, you will receive a link to the recording for this training tomorrow if everything works out with the technology. And finally, please be respectful to all of our other participants. Everybody's going to remain muted during the training just to keep everything organized. But if you have any questions, the chat feature will be open. Please put any questions you have in the chat and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. And with that, I will turn it over to our IDCCA President, Christina Zahorik.
Hello. It's just so good. I see so many friendly faces that I haven't seen in a long while. So other than you, Sue, Sue Reed, she serves in our local county party as well as in a township. So just welcome everyone and thank you for taking the time tonight to jump on this call. As Jillian said, I'm Christina Zahorik, the president of the Illinois Democratic County Chairs Association, and we are here to provide resources and training to our fellow Democrats across the great state of Illinois. And this training kicking off 2021, I think is really, it's really important because this training is the nuts and bolts of trying to provide you with information in your roles as serving as Democrats in your local units of government. So thank you so much for stepping up to serve. It is not always easy, and it's not always easy in this particular time that we find ourselves in. And if there's any thing that you may need as you move through your journey in serving in office, whether you're nonpartisan or serving out as a Democrat, please don't hesitate to reach out to the IDCCA for any assistance that you may need beyond just monetarily. I'll just say that. Moving on to our guest speaker tonight, Rianne Hawkins is with us tonight. She's currently the Director of Advocacy and Campaigns for Planned Parenthood of Illinois. But more importantly, we asked her because she has been, prior to this, serving as a Deputy City Clerk for the city of Springfield. And she comes with a lot of experience as well as participating in a number of professional organizations like the Municipal Clerks of Illinois, the International Institute of Municipal Clerks, and the Association of Government Accountants. So she does have the depth of knowledge and experience, both on the political end, I would say, as well as actually serving, that will be able to assist you in your role as you move forward in serving in government. So I'll turn it right over to you, Rianne, and thank you for being here with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, and thanks so much to the ILDCCA, a great organization that I've had the pleasure to work with for many years now, and very proud to say that Jillian is my sister, so I'm also happy about that as well. Yay, Jillian. But tonight, as Christina said, my name's Rianne Hawkins, and my day job is as the Deputy Director for Advocacy and Campaigns for Planned Parenthood. But my secret superpower night thing that I do at night is I love local government, and especially municipal government, and being a city clerk and record keeping and FOIAs and OMA, Open Meetings Act, that's my super secret power. And I'm so happy that I get to share that with you all tonight. So I'm going to share my screen and we will get going. So bear with me just one moment. Okay, hopefully you all can see this lovely presentation. Okay, so open government. we'll just have a brief guide to the Freedom of Information Act and the Open Meetings Act. There we go. So why do we need FOIA and OMA laws? Hold on. There we go. Because we need open government. You all know, as elected officials in your local municipalities, citizen participation and knowledge in their government is the backbone to our democracy. And governments, by definition, should operate in the public and be held accountable for their actions. The Freedom of Information Act and the Open Meetings Act laws are not obstructions to your work. Please don't think of them as such, but they are tools to help you stay engaged with government at the local level. So first off, let's talk about the Freedom of Information Act. FOIA is the law that recognizes the ability for citizens to review government records. It has been around for a really long time. It was initially passed in 1983. The last major revision of the FOIA law in Illinois was in 2010, so it's been about 10 years. FOIA is not absolute, though. It is not giving citizens a pass to look at everything within government. There are exceptions to the Freedom of Information Act, which we will go into here in a couple minutes. And the government bodies that you all serve on or deal with should have processes in place already to deal with FOIA requests. So please lean on those processes and work within them. So the facts about FOIA. The first thing, and probably the most important thing, is that assuming that all records dealing with public business are open and available for inspection. This includes your personal records. So emails that you exchange with government officials, you know, you're emailing your public works department about a pothole on your street. Maybe you're emailing back and forth with a fellow member of your elected body, text messages, social media, those are all public records. And I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to develop some kind of system to keep track of those emails, whether it's labeling them in your email inbox, or some elected officials choose to have a completely separate channel for their government business. So a separate social media channel, or a separate phone, or a separate email. It's completely up to you how you do it, but I would encourage you to develop some kind of system, because preservation of all those records falls under a different act, which is called the Local Records Act. And your clerk, or your township official, whoever's in charge of keeping all those records, should have processes in place to preserve that as needed. And also, each town, each municipality, each unit of government has a FOIA officer. So they're already trained. Work with them on if you have any questions about FOIAs. If any request for public records should go through your FOIA officer. So hopefully your citizens know that if they are making a Freedom of Information Act request, they can go through the unit of government's FOIA officer. If by chance they come to you directly, you should route it through your FOIA officer. And the reason for that is a couple of things. Number one, your FOIA officer will have the training to know what exceptions or what exemptions might be applicable before handing over the request. And so they'll be able to handle that. Number two, they are required by law to keep a record of every FOIA request that comes into the city. So it's helpful for them to do their job if they're the central clearinghouse for any and all FOIA requests. The FOIA officer, of course, once a request is received, will be in charge of gathering all of the information, do any kind of redactions as needed, and we'll get into that here in a minute, and then respond back to the requester. And just work with your FOIA officer to provide them with as complete of information as possible. You don't want to get caught into a situation where maybe you haven't provided everything in good faith to the FOIA officer, and then down the road through another means, they find out that there might be some records missing. It just wouldn't be a good thing for the government body and for you as the elected official. Now, there are exemptions to the FOIA law. They include personnel records. So remember, you are an employer as an elected body for a government entity. And so personnel records, including any kind of disciplinary action, collective bargaining documents, are all exempt from FOIA laws. Also, if any of you are on a school board, student disciplinary records are also exempt from FOIA as well. Executive session information, which we will get into more in depth when it comes to the Open Meetings Act, are also exempt from FOIA unless the public body takes a public vote to release that information. Personally identifying information such as social security numbers, driver's license numbers, in some cases license plate numbers, are all exempt from FOIA. Proprietary information or drafts, a lot of government entities deal with contracting. They deal with different groups that provide services to the city, and some of that information might be proprietary. Litigation is a big one, probable or ongoing or possible litigation. Those are considered almost attorney-client privilege. You'll work with your corporation counsel on it, but they need to have the ability to talk with you about that litigation in a way that's confidential. And then ongoing investigations, especially if you are serve on a body that oversees a police department or any kind of law enforcement branch. Any kind of ongoing investigations when it comes to that are also exempt to FOIA. This isn't by any means an exhaustive list. There is, I think, 40 some exemptions to the FOIA law. These are just major buckets that these exemptions fall into. And again, your FOIA officer knows all of these exemptions and will be able to process the information and cite any exemptions as needed if they are doing redactions to information. Okay, couple things to remember. As elected officials, everything that you write about public business is subject to a FOIA request. That's emails, that's text messages, social media posts, social media messenger posts, DMs are all subject to FOIA requests if you're discussing city business or municipal government business. Like I said earlier, some elected officials find it helpful to have separate channels or separate emails for political stuff and government stuff. If you choose not to, some people find that a little burdensome. I highly suggest you find a way to catalog and categorize your correspondence so that you can go back and find them easily. You know, what's city business, what's personal business, what might be political business. Again, remember that your emails, including emails that you might have sent before you took office, especially if they are to public employees, are all subject to FOIA, including text messages, etc. And then be sure to comply with any requests in a timely manner. When a FOIA request is submitted and received by a government entity, the FOIA officer has 5 business days to respond to that request. They can ask for an extension, but it only gives them 5 additional days. So in total, they can have up to 10 business days to respond to a request. So you want to make sure that FOIA officer has as much time as they need to go through, you know, the paperwork that they have to go through to do any kind of necessary redactions or to work with your attorney or your corporation counsel to make sure that they're complying with all FOIA laws. Okay, I'm going to pause there because that was a lot of information. I went through it kind of fast. Are there any questions?
We've got a couple questions that have come in. We've got a question. What about notes, handwritten notes that you take during a meeting? Are those subject to FOIA and should those be saved?
I would definitely recommend saving them. I think those would not be subject to FOIA because they would be drafts, considered drafts. But I would not get rid of them just in case. I'd keep them.
We've got another question. You mentioned that ongoing investigations were not subject to FOIA. Is there a time limit on that law enforcement can continue to cite ongoing investigation as an exception?
I'm sure that some of that comes in under the criminal code when it comes to the statute of limitations for investigations. And so definitely consult with an attorney about that, because I think that gets complicated real fast depending on the type of case, what kind of investigation is going on, and then of course the statute of limitations I'm sure would play into effect there as well.
And a follow-up question to that, are police reports themselves subject to FOIA?
It depends on the municipality. So in some municipalities, they are, like for example, in the city of Springfield, police reports are subject to FOIA. I have always been of the belief that if you're requesting a police report that's about you yourself, you shouldn't have to go through the FOIA request process, but it's just dependent on what the local municipality has set up as their process.
And you mentioned some elected officials split out their personal and their government emails just to keep it easier. Is there any issue if someone forwards their government email to a personal issue or to a personal email? Are there any issues that could be caused by that?
There wouldn't be any issues caused by the actual forwarding of the email, but remember, just because you put it in your personal email doesn't mean it's exempt from FOIA then. So no matter where that government business is being discussed, if it's on a personal email, if it's on a government email, if it's on, your email that you've marked for government business, all of that is subject to FOIA. So make sure that you keep track of it and that you know where it is in case someone comes back and asks for it later.
And we've got several questions talking about time limits. How long should people plan to save their emails, text messages, social media messages? Is there a time restriction on how far back someone can FOIA that information?
Yeah, so that gets into the Local Government Records Act. And I have to admit, I did not research the Local Records Act in preparing for this, but I believe the time limit for digital messages is 2 years. So if you have a term of office that's 4 years, anything between 2 and 4 years, I would definitely save. And before you delete anything or take anything down or archive stuff, check with your local government, your clerk. Probably the clerk is going to be the one that's going to be in charge of destroying, or that sounds like a harsh word, but it's not, or getting rid of those kind of records, because there is a lengthy process to getting approval to destroy the records. It's something that happens all the time. Clerks do it all the time, but you do have to obtain permission in order to destroy those records. So just work with your clerk.
And just to confirm, things like direct messages on Facebook or Twitter, those are also subject to FOIA, correct? We often don't think about that as an official.
They are, especially if they have to do with city business or government business. I shouldn't just limit it to city, I apologize. But if they have to do with government business, if people are messaging you or DMing you on Twitter or Facebook, save those messages because they could be subject to FOIA for sure.
And then finally, we've had a couple questions about specific types of documents that may or may not be subject to FOIA. If you're an activist or a volunteer in the community and you want to, if you want records of something, where's a good place to find out whether something is subject to FOIA or not?
Your best bet is to ask for it from the local government. But here's the tricky part. You need to be as specific as possible when you ask for the records. So if you are asking, you want to know if a government body is talking about, let's say, building a new power plant, which is something that we do in Springfield, or we have done in Springfield. That is a large conversation that involves many departments, probably months of planning. You're looking at multiple thousands of documents around that. and you're probably going to get denied because it's a voluminous request. If it's too burdensome on the unit of local government to pull stuff together, they can just outright deny your request. So think about it in smaller bites. You know, you want to know what conversations have been happening around, you know, the public works department from this time period to that time period. Or if you know a contractor is involved, you want any and all records that deal with this certain contractor during a period of time. The key is to try to make it as specific as possible to help the local government find the record and then to actually get you the information that you want to see.
So the best thing to do there is just to ask and see what they give you then. Yeah,
for sure. And, you know, a lot of, you know, some local governments will still do paper. In Springfield, they do digital requests or digital responses to requests. So it's a little bit easier for them to pull everything together digitally and, you know, burn it on a CD or even email it to you. They may have implemented something like Dropbox to get it to you now. It's a lot harder if somebody is copying pages at a copier. In fact, they can charge you for that information or for that work that they have to do to pull together that response. So, yeah.
All right. And then finally, we've got a question here. I know you mentioned in your presentation, assuming that all communication can be FOIA-able if you are talking about official governmental business. What about the actual communication between you and the FOIA officer, though?
That also can be FOIA. It's government business. I can't. That's a really good point. You might be able to, there might be some attorney-client privilege depending on who your FOIA officer is that might come into play there. But yeah, if the FOIA officer is probably an employee of government, and that would be subject to FOIA as well.
All right. And finally, we've got some questions about specifically political parties and their officers. Are those communications, or if you post on a Facebook page for a political organization, is that subject to FOIA?
No, FOIA is limited to government entities. So taxpayer-funded government entities. A political party is not subject to FOIA. Yep.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up our questions for right now. If you've got any questions, keep putting those in the chat, and we'll let you move on.
Okay. All right. We'll move on. Okay. The next part of my presentation is about the Open Meetings Act, which is ensuring that all public business is conducted in public. Okay. So what is the Open Meetings Act? The Open Meetings Act is actually pretty old. It was first enacted in 1957, which I didn't know until last night, that it had been around for that long. And basically it ensures that all public business is conducted in the full view of the public with proper notice. OMA is triggered when a quorum, so a quorum of the elected body is required to take action on anything, to conduct a meeting. But only a majority of a quorum is required to trigger the Open Meetings Act. And basically, if you think about it, that's because a majority of a quorum can take final action on things. And you want to make sure that if you are taking final action on anything, that it's done within full view of the public. And when in doubt, post it. Post that you're going to meet. And we'll get into that here in a second. So the Open Meetings Act requires that meetings are conducted by public bodies are held in open forum. This includes county board meetings, city council meetings, school board meetings, and any subdivisions of the local government. So your fire pension board. I sit on the Urban Forestry Commission for Springfield. That's an open meeting. So it's not just limited to elected officials. It's limited to anybody that serves on a public body in any way, shape, or form. The agendas for these meetings should be posted at least 48 hours, and that's business hours, in advance. That can be taken down to 24 hours if it's a bona fide emergency. Agendas and meeting schedules should be posted in a place where the public can view it 24/7. So if you are a local government that maintains a website regularly, that regularly updates a public website, your agendas and your meeting schedule have to be posted on the website somewhere. If your unit of local government doesn't have a website that is maintained all the time, then the agendas and the public meeting schedule need to be posted in a place where people can go up. Think about it being able to go up at like 2 o'clock in the morning to go and take a look at what is going to be happening in their government in the coming days. So, you know, on the door to City Hall or the Township Hall is a good place to put it, or in the vestibule, as long as you can open up and get to the vestibule internally in the vestibule before you get in the building. But it does need to be in full view of the public. Any gathering of a majority of the public body members where public business will be discussed is subject to the Open Meetings Act. And just a good rule of thumb, any final action on any kind of item, any decision that is made by a government entity needs to be done in public. The debate and the vote all need to be recorded in public. Okay, so here's how it works. Like I just said, the list of the meetings need to be posted where the public can see them. Meetings should be made accessible and open to the public. So that means most of the time these government entities have some kind of open room where you meet, whether it's a city council chambers, a county board council chambers, but it needs to be made accessible. So you can't have a meeting at Jillian's house that is not accessible to people who may not, you know, be able-bodied, or maybe they have a disability where they couldn't walk up Jillian's stairs, right? It needs to be made accessible to the public. Also required, there needs to be time for public comment, and that's usually in the rules that the public body adopts as when public comment is made. I know in the city of Springfield, public comment is always reserved for the end of the meeting. Members of the public can record meetings. So they are allowed to record public meetings with their cell phones. There's no prohibition against that whatsoever. Agendas should give the public an understanding of what action will be taken at the meeting. So you cannot have an agenda that just says roll call, old business, new business, adjourn. That's not good enough. You need more description in there so that the public knows what's going to be discussed, what are you going to take final action on, and will I have a chance to talk? All of that stuff is important. Any questions about Open Meetings Act violations, which can incur some penalties? The public access counselor to the Illinois Attorney General's office is the place to go for that. Same with FOIA too, which we can talk about here at the end. Couple things to remember. Your unit of government is going to have an Open Meetings Act officer, just like they have a FOIA officer. There's an OMA officer. Everyone who serves on a public body is required to do Open Meetings Act training. There's an online training through the Illinois Attorney General's office, and at the end of it, they give you a nice, pretty certificate, which you need to then somehow get to the clerk so that they can keep a record of everybody that's serving on boards that they've been trained in Open Meetings Act. Now, we are living in difficult times with the global pandemic. There has been some changes to FOIA laws. Governor Pritzker has issued a couple of executive orders, and your local municipality might have adopted special rules around how meetings look different during COVID-19. So they might allow for remote participation when they didn't in the past. They might allow members to call in when they didn't in the past. They might require things like masks in a chambers, council chambers, or a county board chambers when they haven't in the past. Just make sure you're familiar with what those changes are and how long they're going to last. I'm not sure. Some municipalities might have put a time limit on them. Some of them might not have. Okay, And here's some helpful resources. Obviously, your internal corporation counsel, your lawyer for your unit of government, should be able to advise you on any questions that you have about Freedom of Information Act or Open Meetings Act. The Illinois Municipal League also has some great guides about these two laws. I think you can purchase them if you're not a member of the IML. It's a different cost than if you are, but they're a great resource as well. The Better Government Association also does periodic trainings. I'm not sure if they're doing them now that we're, during a global pandemic, but they have in the past where they've traveled around and done trainings on these kind of good government laws. And then the Illinois Attorney General's Public Access Counselor is also a great resource as well. They handle any and all appeals to FOIA requests, and they investigate all violations to Open Meetings Act violations that might have happened as well. And use your best judgment. These laws and these regulations are all meant to encourage people to participate in their government. Keep that in mind when you're dealing with all these things. It's important that citizens are engaged and that they know what's going on in their government, and that you be that facilitator to help them to be a part of their government as their elected representative. Okay. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
We've got quite a few coming in. First one is, someone says, our county has 3 commissioners. Does that mean that a conversation between just 2 of them in a hall, office, or social event triggers the Open Meeting Act?
It does. It does. Yep. Especially if they're talking about county business.
And does the public have a right to question or comment witnesses or presenters to the public body in an open meeting? Is that part of the Open Meetings Act?
Ask that again.
If someone presents to, like, say, the city council, does the public have the right to question or comment on that witness, or?
It depends on the rules of procedure for the local government, but overall, no. When people are presenting to the elected body, and you can definitely address in public remarks what the presenter might have said, but to directly question them, I don't think would be allowed.
We had another question come in asking if the Open Meeting Act allows for partisan caucus meetings for county caucuses where the discussion is only political and doesn't touch on county business, or is that in violation of the Open Meetings Act?
That's a really good question. I would say, because we have a similar situation here in Springfield, and no, it doesn't. They've ruled that it doesn't violate the Open Meetings Act, party caucuses. But I would keep a real close eye on those conversations if possible. And if it does leak into county business or city business, something outside political, you could potentially file a complaint.
And I know you said the rules have changed due to COVID-19, and a lot of boards are now meeting online via Zoom. How far can they go to limit the ways that the public can participate in those? I think we had someone mention that they've got a board that only allows comment via email, doesn't allow people to call in. Do you have any more specifics about the changes to that?
Yeah, I would have to look into that a little bit more. The requirement of the act is that the public have the ability to make comments. I don't think it says specifically what form those comments can take. So I'm sure that's how they're getting around that. But I would definitely take a look at the public body, the rules that they've adopted, because the spirit of the law is to let a citizen address the public body in some way, shape, or form. I'm assuming verbally, whether through the phone or in person or through a Zoom, that kind of stuff. I think that's always been the intent.
We had a couple questions earlier about executive session, and I was wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail about the reasons why a governmental body might go into an executive session, if there's any limits to when they can go into that, and what the rules are regarding that.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that you bring it up, I realized that I accidentally had deleted my slide about executive session. So I apologize for not covering that. A public body can definitely go into executive session, and they have to cite to the public why they're going into executive session. In the official record, it needs to mark the beginning and the end time. You know, I went in at 6:45 and I came out at 7:15, and it has to tell the reason why. So you know that they're going to be discussing possible litigation, collective bargaining, proprietary information, disciplinary actions. They have to cite to the public why they're going into executive session. Once they're in executive session, the clerk is required to keep minutes. So there will be a record of that executive session meeting, but the public body has to vote to release those minutes. So you could find out eventually what they talked about, but the public body needs to all consent to letting those minutes go before you can.
And do you know, with the rule changes, we've got a question about how a person can find out about those changes to procedure because of the pandemic. Was there any requirement of boards having to post their changes to procedure, or how can someone find out what's changed?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would recommend contacting the clerk of your community, because they would have to keep a record of all the rules changes and what that looks like. And they should be able to get to you any kind of information about COVID-19 meeting rules. Yeah.
We also had a couple questions about access for the public, specifically a question about whether there is any limit on when boards can meet. This person says that our county board meets Monday mornings at 8 a.m. and no one can attend them because they're working. Is that violating the Open Meetings Act, and what can we do in that case?
As long as they're giving proper notice to the public, they can meet whenever they want, which is that 48-hour requirement. I would highly recommend that you lobby the members to change that, but the board can set their own date and time, and it's done by a vote of when they are meeting. So unfortunately, even though it's inconvenient, it is not a violation, as long as they're letting everybody know that that's when they're going to meet.
We've got a question. What about temporary government officials such as election judges? Are they subject to any of the OMA or FOIA requirements?
No, I don't believe they are.
Okay. And if you are, a volunteer and activist or a member on a board, and you feel that the board is not following FOIA or the OMA, what can you do in that case?
Yeah, so definitely, if you feel comfortable enough, you can bring it up with your corporation counsel, the lawyer for your government entity. If you don't feel comfortable bringing it there for a number of reasons, definitely contact the public access counselor with the Illinois Attorney General's office. Their staff that's their job, is to investigate FOIAs and to investigate any kind of Open Meetings Act violations. Talk with the office, and you can have a conversation with them before you file an official complaint in writing, and then they'll do an investigation.
So if you believe that documents are being destroyed before you can FOIA them, that would be the best office to contact?
It would, and I would also FOIA the Certificate of Destruction, which gets into the Local Records Act. It's a part of the Local Records Act. Any public documents that are being destroyed or that can be destroyed, there has to be a certificate from the archives, Secretary of State Archives Office, giving the government permission to destroy those documents. So it's basically a document that says on this day, I destroyed these documents and here's the list of them. And it's an official sign off from the archivist. So at minimum, they should have that certificate to prove that they had permission. If they don't have the records, you know, and one of the responses to a FOIA might be, we have no records to respond to your request. It could be that your request is too broad or that it's not as specific enough. You can go back and try again and try to make your request a little bit more specific so that they do know what you're talking about. But if you have proof that they destroyed it, that definitely is an issue for the public access counselor.
We've also had a couple questions about social gatherings, and I apologize, there's a train if you can hear it behind me. Some boards that may only have 3 or 4 members and 2 of them are friends, and the social gathering, how do you navigate that as an elected official?
Yeah, don't talk about government business while you're there. You know, I think about small towns where maybe the members of the board attend the same church and you see them every week, right? Don't talk about city business while you're there or county business while you're there. Otherwise, that's an Open Meetings Act violation. That's a real easy way to do it. When in doubt, you can always post an agenda. You know, that seems a little extreme, but you know, that's another way to account for the fact that you've got 2 people coming together talking about city business. But if you're in a social gathering, keep it social. Don't talk about government business. Yeah.
We had a question come in from someone who is unable to attend tonight, but I know several of us live in very Republican areas. Is there a way that we can use FOIA if we are being blocked from participating by the Republicans that make up the majority of the government? Or how would you suggest using that as a strategy?
Yeah. Well, I hate to hear that because hopefully we all agree that open government is the way to go, and hopefully everybody can get on board with allowing the public to see what business is being conducted. I know that doesn't always happen in practice though. So what I would recommend is definitely start making requests for records, usually in areas where things are being kept from part of the public. You know, starting to make requests about records or text messages or emails or anything that you can think of people will start to take notice and maybe rethink their actions. I know that happens in Springfield when you're like, wait, why is Jillian asking for this? Oh, maybe I'm doing something wrong. And then also having an eagle eye out, I think would be important too, and being able to document if there are Open Meetings Act violations going on. You know, these are public officials, their text messages, their emails, just like yours are subject to FOIA, so are theirs. So, you know, ask for any and all emails about a meeting that you know has taken place, or any and all emails regarding decisions that are being made about a certain issue. Yeah, I think there are a number of ways to use the Freedom of Information Act to find out information about your government. Yeah.
All right, well, that looks like all of our questions so far. Was there any other parting thoughts you wanted to give us on FOIA or the Open Meetings Act?
You know, FOIA and Open Meetings Act, I know that it can be a hassle, right? You get a FOIA, all of a sudden you have to dig through your emails when you've, you know, got kids to feed and a job to do, and you're trying to make these important decisions at the city level, and why don't these people just leave me alone? They're not meant to be a burden. They're meant to encourage citizen participation. So definitely look at it as such. And know that it's a good thing that the citizens of your community want to be involved in their government, and do your best to try to facilitate that, because we're all better when we can all come together as a community to make decisions. And it makes our community stronger. It makes our counties stronger when all of our citizens have a voice in our government. And that's really what these two acts are about letting citizens have a voice in their government and making sure that they're able to participate.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us here tonight, Rianne. It was a very informative session. I learned a lot. I hope everybody else did as well. We will be, just a reminder, we'll be sending out a recording of this session to everybody who registered for the meeting tonight. And I believe we'll also be sending out those presentation slides. I know there were some links on there that people might want to revisit. I'm also going to post my email here in the chat. If you have any follow-up questions, or for some reason, if you don't get the presentation from us, feel free to shoot me an email. And thanks once again, everybody, for joining us here tonight. And thank you. We'll see you next time.
Good luck, everybody.